All right, I think we have enough people on the line, and we'll probably have a bit more joining in the next 5 to 10 minutes, but we're going to start. We are already running a bit behind schedule. So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for our webinar introducing target gender equality. We are all very well aware that these are quite challenging times for all, and so we really want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining us. I hope that you can hear me well. If you have issues with the audio, please write in the chat and we'll be able to help you. So, my name is Caterina Agnoletti. I am Program Manager on Social Sustainability and Integrity here at the Global Compact Network UK. And today I am joined by our Executive Director, Steve Kenzie, and my colleague, Carla Derpich, who works with me on the Social Sustainability and Integrity program. We should also have on the line Elizabeth Resch from our HQ. She kindly offered to join us today from New York, so very early start for her, to be able to and to make herself available to answer any questions that you may have and provide a more global perspective about target gender equality. Elizabeth, are you there? Can I just check?
Hi, Caterina. Yes, I am. And thanks for joining everyone. And yeah, as Caterina said, happy to answer any questions as the program is run in a few different countries around the world. And there's some global aspects that I maybe can help clarify if needed.
Okay, great. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, so, sorry. This is our program for today. We are just, because on the line we have also people that are not familiar with the Global Compact, so Steve will give a few welcoming words, and then we'll give a very brief introduction about the UN Global Compact, and then we will move on to talk more in detail about target gender equality, looking at the goals, the expected outcomes, and the program of activities. Carla will give more details and present the timeline for our program in the UK, and go through a bit of the specifics of the joining process. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. In the meantime, while we go through the presentation, please feel free to write your questions in the chat box. Otherwise, at the end of the presentation, you'll be able to either raise your hand and unmute yourself, or we'll just go through the chat and look at your questions. Okay, so without further ado, I will just hand it over to Steve. Steve, I'll just let me know when you want me to move the slides, and I'll just switch them for you.
Okay, thanks, Caterina, and welcome everyone. Let's go to the next slide straight away, please. So we really appreciate you joining. We're quite excited about the level of interest in this program. And as Caterina said, it is a requirement to participate in this program that your organization be participating in the UN Global Compact. And so I'm going to share a little bit of our history and what we do, and give you some of the background you might need to start thinking about that. To begin, this is our 20th anniversary, not playing out quite the way we had planned. There was going to be a huge celebration at UN headquarters in June. That's all been transitioned into an online leaders summit. So that's definitely something, whether you're currently a participant or not, will definitely be worth looking at. There's going to be 2 days of fantastic programming to hopefully inspire us all. Very much our ambition, as much as we're all feeling the pain from the COVID-19 crisis, we are in no hurry to return to normal. We want to return to a new normal that reflects the Sustainable Development Goals and the future we want. And so our ambition is to help all of our stakeholders use this time productively to learn from the extraordinary transitions that have taken place over the last few weeks. Let's see how we can apply some of the new knowledge that we're gaining to the transitions that we need going forward to achieve the goals and fight climate change. Global Compact is doing, I think, a great job on uniting business to respond to COVID-19. And if you go to the Global Compact's website on the landing page, there will be links from there into a number of activities. There's been some, already 2 in the series, fantastic webinars featuring global leaders discussing aspects of the challenge. And next week's webinar is highly relevant to this subject. We'll be looking at the impact of COVID-19 on women. So I urge you to take a look at that. Okay, next slide, please. So just going to the beginning, back in 1999, His Excellency Kofi Annan addressed the World Economic Forum in Davos and challenged business leaders to join an international effort to address the challenges in the world at that time coming out of globalization and the difficulties that presented. And his view was we needed some universal principles and shared values that would apply around the globe. And in this way, we could make globalization work for everyone and give a human face to the global market. We've been really fortunate that his successors as Secretary General have also supported the program. And so it came into effect in July of 2000, and we've been going strong ever since. Next slide, please. There were only 44 companies that joined back in 2000, and now there are over 10,000 globally, as well as another 3,500 non-business organizations that are in the Global Compact. It is truly a multi-stakeholder effort. Again, as I said, working to create the world we want. We're in 160 countries, and there are in fact now 68 local networks around the world like ours. Next slide, please. The essence of the Global Compact, our core, are those universal principles that I referred to earlier. They are all drawn from UN treaties in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And having such a robust foundation makes this initiative, really makes it a strong foundation for you to build up your own corporate sustainability policy, and also in particular, supplier codes of conduct, because these principles apply in whatever challenging market you might be sourcing from or operating in. Next slide, please. In order to join the Global Compact requires a CEO commitment, and that commitment includes really 3 key points. Firstly, a commitment to operationalize our 10 principles through your business. Secondly, to report annually on the progress you're making towards doing that. And thirdly, to support the wider UN development agenda. Next slide, please. We support companies that have made that commitment in a number of ways. This slide is showing some global impact initiatives that are currently underway. These are programs like Target Gender Equality that are created and led out of headquarters in New York, but actually implemented by local networks around the world. We're just wrapping up our first year of the Young SDG Innovators Program, which was the first of these global impact initiatives, and it was a tremendous success. So we're looking forward to repeating that. Target Gender Equality is currently recruiting and will be launching soon. Similarly, SDG Ambition and Business Ambition for 1.5 degree Celsius. So lots happening in that global local space. Here in the UK, Katerina, myself, Carla, and a few others make up our small team, but we are very busy providing a UK-centric program of activity where we focus in on some of the key issues that are facing UK businesses. So compliance with the Modern Slavery Act, for example, support with gender pay gap reporting, promoting the global goals around the country, and supporting climate action. So we offer typically in a normal year, over 30 engagement opportunities a year for members across a very broad range of themes. I think that comes to the end of my introduction. I don't think we were gonna, well, I suppose if there were questions, we could take them now, but otherwise I'll hand over to Katerina and we will get into a little bit more of the detail about target gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. Yes, so we'll have time for a question at the end, as I mentioned. So I'm very happy if you want to shout out now to answer them, but otherwise let's just move to the next session of this webinar. So thanks again, Steve. Steve has just given a short introduction about the Global Impact Initiative, and he's mentioned that target gender equality is one of them. So what is it? What is this initiative? It's an accelerated program focused on supporting companies that, as Steve mentioned, participate in the UN Global Compact in setting and reaching ambitious corporate targets to increase women's representation and leadership across business at all levels. Through a series of activities, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a minute, participants will be able to make progress not only on the 10 principles of the Global Compact that Steve just presented, and particularly the ones on human rights and Principle 6 on labor non-discrimination, but they will also be able to deepen implementation of the women's empowerment principles and strengthen the contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. The women's empowerment principles, also said WEPs, were launched by UN Women and the UN Global Compact back in 2010, and they are really great because they provide guidance to business to empower women in the workplace, marketplace, and community. And in fact, among other things, the WEPs call for business to ensure sufficient participation of women in decision-making at all levels and across all business areas. So they provide a really good platform for this initiative. And also, in terms of the SDGs, the initiative will focus specifically on advancing goal 5, target 5, so 5.5. And it's a goal that calls for women's full participation and equal opportunities for leadership by 2030. In terms of the program, I mentioned already the goal of this initiative. The aim is to increase support companies in setting targets for women's representation at all business levels, but the focus for 2020 will be specifically on corporate boards and executive management positions. The program consists of several activities, which I've mentioned, four types. The first one will be performance analysis. So we will provide facilitated use of the Women's Empowerment Principles Gender Gap Analysis tool, which helps to assess by going through a questionnaire, company's performance on gender equality. So by using the tool, you will be able to understand where you're at in terms of your progress and towards making progress on gender equalities, but also identify gaps and barriers to make progress. And from there, you will build a better idea of what will be the next steps. And this links to the second type of activity, which is capacity building workshops. This will be interactive, expert-led workshops, and there will also be opportunities for peer-to-peer learning. The workshops basically will assist companies in generating unique action plans, drawing from the results of the WEPs tool that I've just talked about for consideration by company leadership. It's not something that is mandatory, but of course that's what we hope to achieve. The next part will be action dialogues. So this is high-level and multi-stakeholder roundtable discussions with multi-stakeholders, including business, government, investors, and other organizations. And the aim will be to discuss and identify concrete actions and generate tangible commitments to remove barriers to gender equality. And of course, strengthening the drivers and making sure that we make progress and women can of course improve their presence in business leadership positions. And then the last bit will be mostly led globally, the advocacy bit. It's a global campaign. It will consist of a global campaign and a range of high-profile events, which will aim to promote corporate targets and action, and also to emphasize the business case for gender equality. And as well, there will be opportunities to showcase women's business leadership. I think maybe Elizabeth at the end will be able to elaborate a little bit on what's happening at the global level. But for now, let's just look at why this is relevant. I think it could be, we of course thought about what's going to happen now with the COVID-19 crisis. And actually the answer that we found is that in challenging times that we are facing today, this COVID-19 pandemic only reinforces the importance of increasing women's participation and representation in decision-making roles. So really now more than ever, we need to accelerate progress. And right now, as you can see from the figures on the slide, the most recent research from the World Economic Forum found that the economic gender gap, that it will take 257 years to close, which is a 55-year increase from last year. So not great. But as I said, there is a strong case for increasing women participation and leadership in business. It's not only the right thing to do, but again, during these particular times, it's also the smart thing to do. And as you can see from the slide, research shows that companies with high female representation have annual returns that are higher. But also, women's participation in business leadership is linked to better ESG performance and looking at including reduced greenhouse gas emissions, stronger worker relations, and reduced incidence of fraud, insider trading, and trading at other unethical practices. And lastly, there is also a development case. So McKinsey Global Institute found back in 2015 that women empowerment and girls could contribute up to $28 trillion to global GDP by 2025. So this just reinforces how important it is to run this initiative, but also from a UK perspective, as Steve mentioned before, the gender pay gap reporting regulations have put a lot of pressure on companies to close the gap and take action to increase representation of women in their organization. So just to reinforce this point. So just to summarize, this will be some of the key aspects of this program. It's a global program run at the local level, focused on local collaboration. And I'll show you the number of local networks in other countries that are joining the program. It's cross-sectoral, so there will be companies from a variety of sectors joining the program in the UK and across the world. And again, it's focusing on driving ambitious corporate target setting and accelerating progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. In terms of expected outcomes, we are hoping to involve over 1,000 companies in this initiative by 2022. And by the end of it, companies will be able to create more gender inclusive businesses aligned with the women's empowerment principles, and also will be able to get connections to organizations and experts that can support their efforts. they will take, of course, action in support of SDG 5.5, as I said, but also it will help them to increase awareness of the business case for women's participation and leadership in business. And then, of course, there will be also opportunity to showcase and promote women business leadership, driving corporate sustainability and progress on the SDGs. So, sorry, these are the countries that are participating around the world. There are other 18 local networks that are currently involved. So if you have colleagues in one of these countries that would like to join at the local level, please let us know and we'll be very happy to connect you with them. And then finally, why so should you join this initiative? I guess it repeats a little bit what I've just said, but just to summarize it in a few words, this initiative will support you in giving you the tools and resources to confidently set ambitious and realistic corporate targets for gender equality. It will help you to understand your current performance through the use of the WEPS tool, as I mentioned before. You will be able to engage in learning opportunities at the local level with other companies like-minded. And you will also get into a network of peers, UN partners, and also experts to support your gender equality strategy. And then again, I've just mentioned this, but it will also be an opportunity to showcase women in your company who are driving business success, sustainability, and contribution to sustainable development goals. Okay, so this is finishes my part of the presentation, and I'll now hand it over to Carla, who will be able to give a bit more detail about the calendar of events in the UK and also how to join the initiative. Carla, over to you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. So I will introduce the program timeline in the UK and give you a little more information on how you can join the initiative in the UK. So the first row in this table shows all the activities that the UK network will be conducting as part of Target Gender Equality. And the second row shows some notable global and local events organized by Global Compact and other partners. You can find this timeline on our website, and we will keep updating it with the latest information and dates throughout the year. We will also send you the slides and the recording of this meeting, so you can access all the links that, that we have in the presentation. So as you can see, we started recruiting companies after the official launch of the program on the 12th of February. And the original deadline for applications was 15th of April, but we recently extended this deadline because of all the challenges that companies are facing due to COVID-19. So the current deadline for applications is the 31st of May. So you have plenty of time to apply in case this is something that interests you. The first program activity in the UK will happen on the 28th of April, and it will be a webinar on the Women's Empowerment Principles Gender Gap Analysis Tool, which Katerina talked about a little bit. And this is also the first performance analysis activity we will organize as part of the program. Just to give you a little bit of information on what will be happening at this webinar. So we will introduce the WEPS Gap tool in detail and explain to companies how to use it. And then during the summer, in July and August, participating companies will have time to implement this tool in their companies. And in case you cannot attend the first webinar on the 28th of April, we will organize an identical webinar on the 9th of June. So if your company joins before the 28th of April, you are very welcome to attend the first webinar. But in case you cannot make it, or in case you join the initiative in May, you are very welcome to join the webinar on the 9th of June. Later on in September, we will have another performance analysis activity, a webinar where we will assess the results of the WEPS tool. And the results are provided in a concise and clear format so that companies can easily identify areas for improvement. And this webinar will be an opportunity to discuss these issues. Starting in October, we will start organizing the first capacity building activities. In October then, we will organize a half-day workshop on defining ambition, and this will be followed by 2 more capacity building activities, one in December and one in early 2021, which will cover strategies for success for improving women's leadership within companies, and then another workshop about preparing for the future. At the moment, we are planning to carry out these workshops in person, but this is obviously dependent on the COVID-19 situation, so we will keep you updated on this. And finally, the last programmatic activity will be a multi-stakeholder action dialogue, also to take place in early 2021. Next slide, please. Right, so your company can join Target Gender Equality by visiting the link that is currently displayed on the screen. And this will take you to a sign-up form for the program. The information you will have to fill out consists of 3 parts. The first one is company information. The second one is information about your company's representatives and ambassador for the program. And the last section is background information. Company information is pretty straightforward, and it includes details on who's submitting the application, whether your company is a WEPS signatory, etc. And with regards to the representatives, these individuals will be expected to actively participate in the program on behalf of the company, and you will have to identify the primary and the alternate representative. The ambassador, on the other hand, is a top-level executive, and they are expected to follow Target Gender Equality developments, provide support to the representatives if needed, and represent the company at high-level events. This person may be the CEO of the company or member of the C-suite or board. And finally, as part of the application, you will also have to answer a few preliminary questions related to your company's gender equality performance. And once you complete the form, your application will be reviewed by the Global Compact Office, who then informs local networks about applications from their respective countries. So we at the UK network will receive information about your application, and we will get in touch with you to confirm it. So the confirmation email may not get to you as soon as you submit your application form. It may take some time for it to be processed. And please also note that if you would like to participate in Target Gender Equality in the UK, you must be a member of the UK network. If you're not a member, you can find more information on how to join on our website, or you can email us for more information. The cost of joining of the initiative depends on your engagement tier with the UN Global Compact. So it is free for UK network members on the participant engagement tier, but there is a small joining fee for those UK network members on the signatory engagement tier. So this fee is £350 plus VAT. And again, you can find all this information on our website, and we will send you the slides so you can double check this. All right, next slide, please. All right, so we are now open to questions. So if you would like to ask any of us about anything related to Target Gender Equality, please feel free to unmute yourself, or I can unmute yourself. Just make sure you let me know in the chat.
Thank you, Carla. Are there any questions in the chat at the moment?
Just a second. So We've got a question from Sarah. Sarah, would you like to ask it? I can unmute you. Right. So we, just a moment. Right. So we have a question from Sarah. Saying that the Staff Chamber have recently set up a women's network, and many of the women in business through this network will not be members of the UN Global Compact, but Staff Chamber is. Can we disseminate this information and support to those in our network, or will they all need to join the Global Compact and access support individually?
So thank you for the question, Sarah, and thanks, Carla, for helping there. So as we mentioned before, you need to be part of the Global Compact to attend the initiatives, the activities in person, because we will need an in-person engagement, but you will be able to share, the conversation and the learnings you got from your participation more widely. If the members of this network wanted to participate more directly, then they will definitely have to join the UN Global Compact. I should mention, though, that to join the Global Compact, you need to be part of an organization with at least 10 employees. So if there is this threshold, if you are below that, you cannot unfortunately join. But this is our what we have decided to go through for this initiative. And I am hoping that I have answered your question, Sarah, but if not, I'm happy to clarify any other point.
Thank you, Katerina. We have a few more questions coming in, so I will just read them out now. So Kate is asking whether the initiative is mostly focusing on creating ambitious goals in own business functions rather than in global supply chains.
So thanks for this good question. I think that for this year, yes, but starting from this is the first year we are running this initiative. The expectation is to run it also in the future, and the focus will be different. So I do expect that the focus will shift to supply chains as well in a different stage of the program. But maybe can I ask Elizabeth to confirm this?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Katerina, and thanks for this question. Yeah, I mean, this year, as Katerina said, the main focus is for companies to set and meet corporate targets for women's representation in senior management as well as corporate boards. While that sounds like maybe a small topic, in general, there's so much to unpack here already. So we won't only talk about target setting, but also mostly focus on the strategies of how to get there, as well as how to prioritize amongst different strategies. So having to talk about structural barriers such as harassment, violence, unconscious bias, care burdens, etc., and then really talk about flexible worker environments, family-friendly policies, how to engage men and other stakeholders in the process, and then also about transparency and communication strategies as well once you've identified a target that you feel comfortable with, and how to, for example, deal with backlash among the company or outside once you've set an ambitious target. So there's a lot to unpack within these 3 capacity building workshops that Katerina said already in the program before. However, we envision this program to go on in the following year with another round that you're then, of course, very much encouraged to participate in as well, where most likely we'll focus on the supply chain, specifically on engaging women-owned businesses in the supply chain, and aspects like that. However, that's still in development, and I think we will also very much depend on all the input from you that will participate in the program's first round, as of course we want to cater to your interests and take the most appropriate next step that's most relevant to your interests and needs. So I hope that answered the question.
And could I just add, Steve here, just that supply chains are integral to the women's empowerment principles. So the work around the WEPS gap analysis tool and anything to do with women's empowerment will bring in the supply chain questions into the discussion, and obviously for organizations where that is a priority, the work around the women's empowerment principles and the tool will definitely provide an opportunity to make some progress there. Thank you.
Definitely. I mean, it's always hard to look at any gender aspects in a vacuum anyway. So that's why the women's empowerment principles will definitely serve as a backbone for the whole program. And as Steve mentioned, the first activity will be the gap analysis tool, and supply chain aspects are very much integrated there in every question of the tool.
Great, thank you both. Carla, any other questions?
Yeah, we have a question from Harry. So do the two representatives need to be D&I or HR professionals, or is it fine for staff reps to be from any background? Secondly, does the Women Empowerment Tool work for just the UK or for international companies, and will it work across countries? I think I can take on this question. So
yeah, absolutely.
So it is not necessary for the two representatives be D&I or HR professionals, and we actually encourage participating companies to consider diversity in terms of personal profiles. So for example, you can have one male and one female representatives and different corporate functions, different levels within the organizations. So of course, if you do have reps from the D&I or HR departments who would be interested, you are more than welcome to nominate them, but it's not necessary. And in terms of the WEPS Gap tool, so it works for, it doesn't work just for the UK, it is applicable to international companies as well. It was actually developed via 12 regional consultations, and so the questions are tailored to companies worldwide, and both big companies and small and medium-sized enterprises can use them. So it is very appropriate for all sorts of companies. I hope that answers the question. And then we have a question from Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you are unmuted, so would you like to come in and ask a question, or would you prefer for me to read it out?
That's fine, you go ahead and read it out, please.
Yep. So do you have any sort of target for numbers in the first 12 months? And are you targeting any particular sectors, for example, the travel or tourism sector? And what about micro and small businesses which might wish to support the initiative but won't have the resources or numbers to join fully, especially with the current climate? Is there anything you can suggest for businesses with less than 10 employees who subscribe to the UNGC values? Katerina, would you like to take down?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question?
Yeah, so do you have any sort of target for numbers in the first 12 months?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes, yeah, perfect. No, I mean, the idea is to at least set 30% women representation, because that's the indication, the kind of a universal target, that it's a recognized target and as a kind of minimum, but there is no requirement to set such a target. It can be higher. I would say we would encourage to set the target to at least 30%. And in terms of the question regarding the question regarding participation of smaller companies, unfortunately, this is a capacity constraint issue that we have been facing. We are trying to solve it right now, and we are discussing how we could best support, but unfortunately at the moment we cannot proactively engage with these kind of companies. However, the principles of the Global Compact are applicable to any type of company as well as the WEPS tool. So these are still open to any kind of company. I wonder whether, Steve, you want to add something to this?
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to, say that the Women's Empowerment Principles is a collaborative creation of the UN Global Compact and UN Women. And so at www.weps.org, it's all in the open, all open source and available to anyone that's interested. The same is true of the gap analysis tool that is open to companies of all sizes to use that. Certainly we recognize the need. So I'm not sure, we're hoping to have approximately 40 companies participating in the program in the first year. I think that's right, isn't it?
Oh, sorry.
30, okay.
30.
So we will seek to ensure that some of the learning from the program is disseminated more widely to our complete membership and beyond. So we are seeking to get it out wider, and for smaller companies there's still access to a lot of the key materials that are in the public domain. Just to the question about sectors, all sectors would be most welcome. We consider it to be one of our strengths is the diversity of our membership. And this is where a lot of the value comes, where you have a situation or a challenge such as gender equality that really applies across every sector. We think there's a lot of value in exposing people to ideas and perspectives from different sectors. Someone who spent their career in retail will have a way of looking at things. Someone who's been in extractives or pharma will have a different way. And by coming together to explore a common challenge, we think this is a way that we can find innovation. And certainly this has happened in the past, and we found it to be really valuable, and members have fed back that. So every sector, most welcome to participate.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. I forgot completely to actually answer that bit, so thank you very much. Sorry, I see that we have a hand raised by Andrew. So it's been there for a while. Should I just give the word to you, Andrew? You're muted now.
Hi, thanks for unmuting me. It's just a quick question following up on what Steve was saying. Is it your intention to cap participation at this stage to the first 30 companies that sign up, or are you willing to sort of extend it?
No, for the moment that's our the cap that we have set, and this is mainly because we have thought about whether we could have a bigger group, but to make this initiative effective, having the 30 companies, we have just decided that it was the maximum number we could have. We had similar groups in the network and we have used this model before, and we found that having 30 companies is the most effective way of making sure we achieve the goals of this type of initiative.
Okay.
But for the moment, we don't have an issue with numbers, so we still have plenty of space.
Okay, thanks.
I would just add, though, I'm not sure that it will necessarily be the first 30 that apply. We may need to, if we are oversubscribed, we may need to exercise some judgment to ensure we have the diversity that I spoke of before. So,
yeah.
so we may have to exercise some control over who participates.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. We are a bit behind schedule, but if there is another question, maybe I can just quickly take that one and then we can close the webinar. And any other question, just you can email it to us, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, so we have a few questions in the chat. So I will take the next one, but do feel free to email us as we will be wrapping up the webinar soon. So if you have any other questions, please do email us and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. So a question from Lucy. For smaller companies, C-suite personnel will not be available to participate in this program. Unfortunately, we would only have 2 representatives, but no ambassador. Would we still be able to take part in the program without someone from C-suite level, even if the CEO gave approval to participate?
Is that for me, Carla?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we do encourage to have that ambassador, but I just wanted to reiterate that what Carla briefly mentioned before, the ambassador is not a role that requires direct and a lot of engagement, direct engagement and participation to the initiative. It's more a supportive role. So the idea is to have someone in your company who can sponsor the actions that you are going to implement and to support the implementation of the action plan that you will get from participating in the initiative. So if your CEO has supported it, it could even be him, and there is no, they are expected to, the only activities that they would expect to be expected to attend are the roundtables, but it's not a mandatory requirement. So we would still encourage you to attend if possible, with your CEO, for example. But if that's not possible, we do encourage you to have that kind of support and identify this ambassador, because it will be a huge support internally to promote your actions. I hope that I'm answering the question. But if not, again, we are very happy to take any further doubts or questions through by email. Actually, we have this is last slide. Sorry, Carla, I'll just quickly run through it because we are really running out of time. Just a few reminders. We have the application deadline, as Carla mentioned, is the 31st of May, and the first webinar will be on the 28th of April or the 9th of June. There are some upcoming events that you may be interested in. The first one is a special session of the UN Global Compact Academy. Is open to everyone, big companies, small companies, self-employed, everyone. It's on the 14th of April. It's going to talk about how business can support women in times of crisis. You have the link here to register. There is another webinar you can register for on the 15th of April, which is going to talk about women's empowerment in the decisive decade. And the Young SDGs Innovators Program webinar on the 21st of April will be a similar webinar to this one to introduce this Global Impact Initiative, and one of our colleagues will lead on that. And then the last bit, I'll hand it over to Carla to quickly say a few words about that.
So yeah, as some of our upcoming events also include the accessibility webinar that is currently planned to happen in May, and we will be updating our events webpage on our website with the latest information. And yeah, as Katerina mentioned, we also have a few great programs other than Target Gender Equality. So the Young SDG Innovators Program is currently wrapping up, and you can join the webinar on the 21st of April to learn more about it. And on the 14th of April, the UN Global Compact and Business for Social Responsibility are organizing a webinar which will explore how companies are implementing the women's empowerment principles, and they will also present findings from the WEP's gender gap analysis tool. This will be particularly interesting for companies joining or wishing to join TUG Gender Equality, given that the implementation of this tool is the first step that companies will have to take during the program. And on the 15th of April, there is another interesting, on the 14th of April, there is another interesting webinar that is organized by the UN Global Compact Academy, and it is about how business can support women in times of crisis. This is also particularly relevant for anyone wishing to join TUG Gender Equality in these times.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you very much. Just to wrap up, you have all the contacts for learning more about the initiative here on the right-hand side. And if you want to ask any questions to us, please feel free to reach out to Carla for the UK network and Elizabeth, who has been with us today, or Lauren from the UN Global Compact HQ. And with that, I thank you very much. Carla did mention we're going to share the slides and the recording very soon. Again, thank you so much for staying as much later than expected, and for the many questions, we'll get back to you with answers as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.